So Gronway Perry was born in Salt Lake, and he is kind of a master of all trades. He ends up studying agriculture. He comes down to Cedar City to work at the BAC, which will become SUU, as a teacher.
What did BAC stand for?
Branch Agricultural College.
Oh, okay.
Actually, we don't have to dive into that, but it was BNS, which was a normal school for teachers.
Oh,
and then it turned into an agricultural school. So he comes down to teach here and falls in love with the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I learned from someone older than me years ago that if you like where you are, you find reasons to stay, not reasons to go.
Right.
And Gronway Perry was one of these guys who found reasons to stay. He became involved in all kinds of things. It's business or politics or teaching. And so he ended up going to World War I, but he had a reaction to a vaccine that wouldn't let him travel. And so he ended up taking care of horses for the Army, which became a big love of his. And he really began thinking about horse-drawn vehicles and the preservation of his past, which was important to him. So he just stayed here and created businesses and things to stay. He ran for mayor. But anyway, as a younger guy, he brought his brothers, specifically his brother Chauncey, down. And they're the ones that, at the time, Gronway's managing the Cedars Hotel, which is still on Main Street. It's not a hotel anymore, but that building is still there. And he is there when a survey crew who's there surveying what will become Zion and some Cedar Breaks is there talking. And he gets this idea about maybe we should find ways to take people there. Right. And this is in the mid 1920-ish. And so
like a local guide.
Yeah, like a local guide. And so he works with the Salt Lake Los Angeles Railroad to get this little company going, the Utah Parks Transportation Company, gets his brother Chauncey to come and help. He has another younger brother, Whit, and he begins this concession. Which is one reason why Union Pacific is even more interested is because they already have a transportation concession in place.
Yeah.
And then they get another guy who has been very successful in Yellowstone, William Wiley, to do the tent camp. So there's some infrastructure already here by the time the railroad comes. So Gronway Perry is the guy that gets his brother to come down and make that happen. As that begins to take off, his brother Chauncey had trained as a pilot in World War I, never flew in combat, but knew how to fly, loved to fly. And what they do is they begin thinking about ways to stay and not to go. And they see the early days of the movies and Hollywood Westerns that are obviously filmed on back lots and everything else. And they see the country in which we live here in the Southwest and think, well, wouldn't it be cool if we started filming here? Right. And so they knew they needed to get movie companies to think about logistics, and they could help with that.
Right.
So Chauncey flies over this area with a movie camera, taking pictures. Gronway, while he had been in the Army and taking care of horses, had learned to play polo and loved it, and became connected with Will Rogers, who was a very famous American of the day. And so using their skills and their connections, they begin to get Hollywood to say, hey, here's this area. Why not film movies here? Now the train comes to Cedar City, so you can come to Cedar City. We will then take you to these locations and we'll feed you. We'll take care of all the catering. We've got extras. We've got horses. So all of this stuff you won't need to get, and you'll be filming in these amazing locations.
Right.
And so they agree. And so in 1923 and 1924, a movie company comes out. Tom Mix, who was the great movie cowboy of the day, films the first movie ever filmed in Utah called Deadwood Coach.
Yeah.
And it's filmed partly in Cedar City, but it's mostly filmed in Zion. And Cedar City is the gateway there.
Yeah.
Right. That Tom Mix comes into Cedar City, great celebrations, parades, all kinds of stuff to make that happen. And he goes and he promises that he and his movie cowboys will come to the Iron County Rodeo. Okay. But as it turns out, the weather is so great that they get done early. And the movie company, I think it might be Fox, 20th Century Fox, or I may be off there, but they say, well, we're not going to pay you just to stay in Southern Utah for another week. So he has to go. And he writes this big apologetic letter about how he's a man of his word, but he's also had signed a contract and everything else. So Deadwood Coach is the film that opens movie making in Utah.
And it's black and white.
It is, and it no longer exists. It no longer exists.
Not in the public domain or anything.
No, it burned away. All the copies were gone. First of all, but then the only copies that were left, one of the big movie studios had a big fire. And burned a lot of their films, and Deadwood Coach is one of those.
Oh, wow.
So there's a great historian named James Dark who wrote a book on Hollywood in Utah in general, and has looked and looked and looked, but that film is gone. It is a lost film. So we have reviews of it, we have still images and marketing of it, and we have newspaper clippings.
I was going to say, I thought I've seen some things.
So they're like title cards, and so we have some images of the film. We have some pictures of Tom Mix in Utah, lots of newspaper reports about it, but that's it. There's no copy of that film in existence.
You know, I didn't know about the Will Rogers connection. That is such a interesting connection through playing polo. And it just makes me think of how valuable having connections are to connect with the right people to make things possible. Whether it's in Iron County or whether it's for somebody's business or whatever the case is, that's just so interesting. All these little pieces that come together. And I love how you talked about how the Perry brothers had already thought about the logistics that Hollywood might go, we can't do it because we need horses. We've got to travel, we've got to ship all these things. Where are we going to get the extras? They thought through some of those logistics and said, hey, we want this here. We need to think what their needs are going to be and where they're going to say no, right? And a lot of times concepts for business or events or things, people say, oh, they should just bring it here because it's great here. Cedar City is wonderful, and it is. But they clearly thought out a path to make it possible, to make it as easy as possible to get here. And in my role, that's a lot of what I do when we're trying to bring businesses and site selectors here is how do we make it as easy and as palatable as possible to come here. And I just love the savvy nature that the Perry brothers have. And I love how you're talking about loving it here. So finding reasons to stay here, right?